Oh,
I see
got more
somebody
people
popping
join.
up on my screen.
Admit all. Yeah, got lots of people joining here, so I'm just trying to keep up. All right, guys, we're gonna get going. Thank you for joining us all outdoors with Muck Simons, and of course my co-host Darren Wandy. We got some special guests here tonight. What we're going to be talking about tonight, guys, is what I call bear essentials. I do a presentation at Cabela's but called Bear Essentials, and it's all about spring bear hunting. And because of the way things are going in the world right now, this is probably the best way to get our information out there. So I called upon, Darren called upon some specialists in the field with bears. We're going to introduce them, and then we're just going to get talking bears and spring bear hunting in particular. So I'm going to start with Don. Don Wolk, he's a good friend of mine from Regina here. Don's a taxidermist. He has Don's Taxidermy. Don's been doing taxidermy since 1978. And in the early 80s, he learned about taxidermy and stuff like that. And he's also been a teacher at it. So I want to welcome Don. Don, we're going to lean on you a lot for what people want to learn when it comes to, hide preparation and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
I'm going to introduce Blair, and Blair can give a little bit of his background, but I know Blair through a mutual friend. Our buddy Dean Sleva runs Spear Creek Outfitters, and from what Dean tells me, Blair's the main man at the camp, and he's his main right-hand man. Dean spoke very highly of Blair. I know Blair in passing. I don't really know him personally, but I know him through Dean, and I follow him on Facebook, and he's got some awesome critters hanging on his wall, and I know that Dean considers him to be an essential in his camp at a camp there at Bear Camp. So, Blair, if you want to give yourself a little bit of a background, we'd appreciate that.
Yeah, I grew up in Saskatchewan, and I've been guiding for 25 years, and I've been hunting bears for probably 31 years. And I've been working for Dean for the past 11 years, and I know a lot about bear hunting.
Right on, welcome.
And of course, last but not least is Tammy Wood. Tammy is Sossy Outdoors. She's on the Sportsman channel. She has a show that plays 3 times a week. Tammy is a bear hunter, and it's going to be good to have Tammy on from the BC perspective, a different province where we can't bait them, as well as Tammy's an amazing chef for wild game and stuff like that. So welcome, Tammy, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I should note Tammy and I are on the Cabela's pro staff team, so we have a common link there, and Spy Point, I guess we're both on that team.
Yeah.
So we cross paths once in a while, and of course I want to thank the people that are joining us right now. For those that are just joining us to watch our conversation, at the end I'll give about a 20 minutes for you guys if you have any questions. I mean, by all means, if you want to join in, just because you're muted, just raise your hand, and if I see, I'll let you talk. Just remember, keep it clean. This is a family program, and we want to try to keep it to bear hunting. So, Darren, you got anything you want to start with?
I'm going to start off with our guest Tammy, and I've never harvested a bear myself. I've been out a couple times, and I know that obviously we have 2 seasons. We have a spring and a fall. And we were just kind of talking beforehand, and Don had brought a comment up about, what do people prefer, the spring bear meat or the fall meat? There's some people in general that when you tell them, you're pursuing a bear, they're like, you're not going to eat that, are you? So just give us a little bit of background, and maybe all 3 can chime in, but maybe just give us a little background in your field about preparing food, what you make out of it. I know you have a sample sitting in front of you for that you've been preparing for the last couple of days. So can you just fill us in a little bit about what that looks like?
Okay. All right. So first things first, spring bear or fall bear. For me, I do enjoy cooking with spring bear just because it doesn't have all of the fat. So when I'm skinning out the bear and preparing the meat, it's not as greasy because it already has kind of a greasy texture to it. And with that meat, if you're going to make a sausage or anything out of bear or pepperoni even, I always use beef chuck. I never use pork. If you use pork, it's going to be too greasy. So those are a couple benefits about the spring bear, is the fact that it doesn't have fat. However, with the fall bear, I like it because it's got the fat. I use all the fat. The last fall bear I took last fall, I got 35 pounds of fat off that bear, and vacuum sealed it all. And even some of the stuff that kind of had little bits and pieces of things in it, I ended up grinding it up and made suet balls for the birds with it. I've made salve for it. A lot of First Nations use bear fat salve. I've created quite a lot of it, have it in jars in my freezer, and I give it away to people that are having, arthritis issues or sore muscles. And it also is excellent for leather. I polish my boots with it. It's, the fall bear does have a lot of benefits as well. And but as far as cooking bear, you just want to make sure, because of trichinosis, a lot of people get nervous about that, but cougars have it too. Any predatory animal can have trichinosis. I mean, pork used to have it. Now we've pretty much bred it out of it. But with bear meat, you just have to make sure to cook it well. So always make sure that your bear meat is cooked up to 185 degrees. So when you're looking at a bear, think about a chicken. You're not going to eat a medium rare chicken. You're going to cook it all the way. So just make sure you're around 185. That's why I do a lot of ethnic cooking with bear meat, because most ethnic cooking is, stir fry or, cooking with lots of spices. Things are sliced thin, so it cooks faster. So I do a lot of Indian dishes, like masala dishes with my bear. I also do Greek dishes. I don't know if you've ever tried moussaka, but I do make a bear moussaka, and I make everything bear. But what I made today was a corned bear. So I took a leg of bear, deboned it, and added a bunch of pickling spices, cinnamon sticks, cardamom pods, and a lot of bay leaves in my brine. I put in whole peppercorns, filled it up with about 4 liters. My brine was about 4 liters of water, and about a cup of salt. It usually requires about 2 cups of salt, but for myself, I find it way too salty. And after you've brined it, you usually have to soak it for a day to try to get that salt kind of extracted out of it. So I don't do it. I just 1 cup of salt, we're good. So anyways, here is one of my little roasts that I did. I've already been eating it. But after brining it for 10 days in the fridge and flipping it every day, take it out, throw it in your smoker, no heat. Usually in the weather that it is now where I am, I think it went up to about 125 degrees, but I smoked it for about between 3 and 4 hours, pulled it out, and then you just boil it. Just boil it till it's soft, take it out, slice it up, put it in your sandwich, eat it with cabbage. It's good.
Any kind of smoke in particular you use for the flavor?
For this one, I wanted it because I didn't know whether the smoke was going to be affected by the boiling, because you're boiling it for hours. I didn't want to lose that smoke flavor, so I actually went with a hickory chip, which is a little bit stronger. So this corn bear I did with hickory biscuits, and it turned out fantastic. My kids have already had a little piece of it, and they just love it. And I've got 6 more pieces downstairs, so it's not going to last. It'll be gone. I have 6 kids. Nothing lasts around here, ever.
I want to get to Dawn, but I'm going to go to Blair first, because I think before we get to where Dawn comes into play as a taxidermist, Blair, what works best for bait? Is it meat, sweets, grease, grain? Is it difference in the spring than the fall? How do we get to where you pick a bait site and then determine what you use for bait?
Yeah, the best bait, like right off the bat, once they pass their plug and stuff, they like the beets. They don't really necessarily hit the sweets as hard till it gets further on into May and June, but beavers and oats and grease are the best bait you can use right off the bat. And then use more sweets as the season progresses and into June. They love icing in June. That's a really good bait. And any kind of trail mix and sweets. They still like the bigger boars, like fresh beavers. If you can keep beavers in the freezer and unthaw them in June and stuff during the rut, they really like the fresh beavers later on as well. But they really like the sweets later on too. But yeah, beavers, oats, and grease is still your best bear bait by far.
What do you guys look for when you try to set up a bait site?
We try to get back in as far as possible into the middle of nowhere off the main path, and following creek systems or lakes. Water's a good thing. You kind of want to have your tree stand. It's good to have structure at your back where they can't circle around you. Like have your tree stand backing right against a creek or a lake. That way they can't circle on you to try and wind you. But they travel natural corridors like beaver floods, swamps, lakes, rivers, creeks. The further away from humans you get, the better.
So Don, you got a big bear on the ground, and I'm guessing you see all kinds of things come into your shop. How do you skin a bear for a rug, and how do you skin it for a life size?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Well, first off, I'd be celebrating. And then what I would do is I'd be deciding on what you're going to do with it. In other words, for a rug, as opposed to a life size. One of the things that I can't stress enough, and even to the outfitters, if the client or the person is going to be doing it as a life size, please take measurements. In other words, four basic measurements on a life-size bear would be from the nose to the corner of the eye, just behind the head for the size of the neck, just behind the front legs for the chest, and around the belly, the girth. Also, as well as from nose to the base of the tail for the length on a life size. That can really, really help the taxidermist out. Many times we get hides coming in and I want a life size. Okay. And then we have to try to figure out the size once we unroll or thaw it out or unroll it. When it comes to a rug, the key thing for a rug is to make sure you make all your cuts first. Don't cut down one leg and then start skinning it and then go to the other leg and start skinning it. Because what happens 9 times out of 10, when you go to make your cut on the other side, they don't even up. You lose track of where the cuts were made. So you end up with a warped, lopsided hide. With that being said, a lot of taxidermists can fix it. However, they end up cutting pieces of hide out, make the rug actually a little bit smaller than it may be. So when it comes to a rug, you want to skin from basically the middle of the wrist, follow the hairline, and then as you come up into the armpit, don't cut through the armpit. You want to angle it up into the throat area. The reason you do that is because what happens if you cut right into the armpit and go straight across, that flap comes up on top of the bear rug, if you see where it's laying down, which actually should be underneath here. So taxidermists may have to cut that out and try to replace it back into the armpit, or try to pull it together underneath the armpit where there's hardly any hair anyway. So that tends to be a challenge. When it comes to the back legs, basically from the heel, follow the hairline till just before you get to the vent and you start angling it up into towards, I want to say towards the stem or up and above the female organ. Just angle it up, same thing, so that you're not getting that flap way out wide. You're trying to make it full and long in the back part. But again, make all your cuts first. Don't cut up into the chin, just take it to the throat. Do all your skinning. Make sure, and this is the same thing with the life size, you make all your skinning. However, the life size will be different, and I'll explain that in a second. Once you get the bear skinned, if you're unsure of how to do it, the best possible thing you can do with a bear hide is freeze it. Cut it off behind the skull, roll it up, and freeze it. That's the best possible scenario. Let your taxidermist deal with everything else, especially if you don't have the experience or the know-how on how to split the lips, how to split the ears, or any of that. You could visit your taxidermist and they might give you a bit of a crash course on how to skin it and how to do the splitting and everything, just to get it at least apart. And then what you do is you want to make sure that all the fat is off the animal. Salt won't penetrate fat. So what you do is you try to scrape as much of the fat off as you can, and then just lay the salt to it if you do not have access to a freezer. Do not salt the hide and then throw it in the freezer. It won't freeze. So you have two ways of doing it. If you're up in a northern community where you have no access, then you must learn to split and take those, take the pads out, or take the paws out all the way down into the first knuckle, all the way down to the claw. And you have to make sure you cram salt in there. If you have access to a freezer, roll it up and put it in the freezer. A life-size mount, the best way to do that is making your incision from the base of the skull, go right along the back to the tail, right through to the tip of the tail, and skin it out like a pair of pants. The reason for that is because on the underside of bears, there's bare spots, basically underneath the belly and the armpits, where most people will make their cuts. On a rug, it's not so bad because you're stretching that out. However, on a life size, it's really tough. Sometimes you'll see taxidermists and you'll see those marks, you'll see those lines. Depending on the mount, if it's down on all fours, it's not so bad because you don't see it. But at least on the back, it's got so much fur there that it hides everything. Same thing. All the fat has to come off because salt won't penetrate fat. You have to go through the same process with skinning out all the paws, skinning out the head, splitting the ears, splitting the lips, doing all that. If you don't know, freeze it, or at least visit your taxidermist, and we'll give you an idea of what you're supposed to do on how to do it.
Okay. So Tammy, Don has just given us the step-by-step play view of how to skin one out. As someone who makes a living or has a TV show and is it brings the cooking aspect to it, what are some tips for people that have that bear down, getting it processed, getting it harvested? What are some tips that you want to do to make sure that we're taking that product back home that's going to be tasting good and not prolonging the process of harvest? What are some tips that you can provide for us for making sure we're making the most of that meat?
Well, if you're out in in your hunting camp, I mean, for me, with any type of animal, a lot of people like to hang their meat for X number of days, whatever. Because I live in such a mild climate here, I'm on the west coast of BC, so it's very mild. It's not very cold. It's almost like California of Canada. So I always make sure to skin out my bear and get it cleaned out, get it gutted as fast as I can. That's the first thing I do when I'm out in the woods anyways. I usually always bring a tarp with me too, just to keep everything clean. And then I put everything, I quarter it, throw it in game bags, and that's pretty much how I bring it home, is just like that. And again, I usually throw them in the back fridge because I'm too tired to do it the same day. And then start deboning it and putting it into sections, right? Like I'll have my stew meat, I'll have my burger, I'll have my stuff set aside for pepperoni, whatever I want. And I always make sure everything is very well labeled. And yeah, it's pretty much all you have to do. Just keep it clean. Nothing's worse than getting a hair in your tooth.
Yeah, those game bags are allowing the air to penetrate and
keeping the flies and everything off it. I mean, I've some spring bear that I've taken. It's been just a hassle. I've had flies all over my face, and I'm trying to get this thing cleaned up, and it's just a pain. When I was on the island, it was these little black flies, and I was getting so irritated. But you just want to get them cleaned up as much as possible. Like I have another gentleman, a friend of mine. Like I do all my own cutting, but I do have a friend that took care of my elk for me because it was just too big. Like I didn't really know where to begin with this massive animal. So I did bring him in there and he inspected it, and he found, even with the game bags, he found 2 little fly larvae just right along the side. And they were so tiny, and he saw it right away, and it was like cutting it out just so it doesn't infect anything else in the cooler. It's just so important to keep it nice. Like I deal with donated meat all the time, just because I do a lot of conservation dinners. I always, donate my time and help out these great causes. And a lot of the meat that we get is all donated, and you'd be surprised. A lot of people don't know how to take care of their meat. So yeah, it does take time, but really basic stuff. Keep it clean. Keep it as clean as you can. That's all that matters. Keep it clean. And also leave leave all the, for me, when I'm in the woods, it's just a matter of just skinning it out and keeping all of the silver skin and everything on it. It's almost like a protection barrier. So just keep that on there too, because once you get it home, all that's going to be skinned off and you're going to have nice, beautiful meat underneath. So always make sure to keep that. Don't get too fussy out there. Not that we ever do, but yeah, clean, use bags, get it in the fridge, pronto.
So hey, Blair, one thing that I find people that are just getting into bear hunting and in particular spring bear hunting is there's a couple, well, when I do my presentations or even people I know that have bear hunted, I notice that they run into the first bear that they see they want to harvest. And have you guys as an outfitter, how do you control that? How do you manage your bears? And how do you help your clients field judge those so that you're, one, taking a mature bear, and two, sexing the animals so that they're getting a mature boar? Or, I mean, a big sow is definitely a good trophy, but I think most of us want to get that big boar. So how do you guys do that?
Yeah, like, and the biggest thing about that is why we bait. By setting up these bait stations, we're being very selective in the animals we choose to harvest. Trail cameras make up that difference. We run 40 to 50 bait stations. We got cameras up. We know which bears are which bait. So when those hunters come into camp, and a lot of them, like, some just want a bear, or it's their first bear. Some want a big bear. Some want colored bears. So we select the bait sites for those hunters. We show them the trail cam pictures of the bears, and we try and target those bears at those bait sites for the week that they're up. And a lot of times, like you said, in sizing them and judging them, we use the barrels, 45-gallon drums. We stand them up at the bait sites when we take the hunters in. But a lot of times, other bears come in earlier in their pecking order. They knock the barrels down. So we'll use icing. We'll put icing in a tree at about the same height as the barrel, letting those hunters know that bear's back's as high as that icing. He's a shooter bear as well. Or you can cut logs, like I said, into 5, 6, 7-foot chunks to see if that bear's length's 5, 6, 7 feet, to see if he's mature enough. And that, but like I said, it's being very selective when you bait with those cameras and that, and you know what you're going to shoot. You have way less mistakes for those hunters to harvest. I mean, they still make mistakes because they get excited and adrenaline's pumping. And I mean, we've had hunters miss 500-pound bears at 20 yards with a rifle.
Well, I know what I tell people when I'm doing my presentations is I say that if you have time, there's nothing better for experience than just watching bears. See the first one in, see the second one in, and then start comparing them. Because when I was younger, I wanted to shoot the first bear that came in. It was just a pure excitement thing. But as I got older and got more experience with bear hunting, I found that if you really want to sex a bear, if you really want to size it, you just have to put the time in to look over these bears. Do you not agree?
Yeah, no, I agree totally. Is the more time you spend watching them, and like more than likely when you go to sit in a stand at 3, 4 in the afternoon till dark, your smaller bears are normally the ones that come in first, because there's usually a pecking order at every bait site. And it's usually the bigger bears. They get bigger as the evening progresses. And then bigger trophy bears are usually the last 30 minutes before legal light. And I mean, like you said, when you're watching bears, you can watch all that as the evenings progress and stuff. And like for sizing, like for sexing them, sows predominantly will be narrower hips. They'll be skinnier. They'll have a little longer snout. But the biggest thing and the quickest thing I see is their ankles. You look at a bear's ankles. That sow's ankles will be very skinny. A boar's will fill out from their forearm right to their paw. And it's a lot easier to see their ankles, you know what I mean, to judge it right away. But there's a certain size where, like I said, when a sow gets up to that 250, 300-pound range, it can be tough if it's a dry sow coming in to judge it with a mature boar. It can be difficult.
You guys, I'm just going to bring in Mike here, because I don't know if you know Mike, but Mike's got his own TV show as well. And he has his own video cast. So, hey, Mike, how's it doing? I got you unmuted there, Mike, so you could chat.
Oh, well, yeah, it's we're in our first season here, so it's going okay. I'm up in northern BC actually, and so we can't bait bears, obviously. So been getting out. I haven't seen any on the trail cams yet, but they're just starting to wake up. And yeah, we've got 7 video casts now, and then we threw up a few of our hunts last year that we videoed. We got a mountain goat last year, so that was pretty exciting. So yeah, we're just playing it out with this whole COVID-19 thing. It's a bit of a run and gun, but we'll see how the season progresses.
Well, Mike, I appreciate you actually jumping in, and you're a great resource. Like I said, you got your own TV show like Tammy does, but you're also a big outdoorsman and stuff. So jump in at any time. Say, hey, Dawn, I got a question for you. Tell us a good bear story. If you've been doing this since '78, you've got to have a good bear story in there.
Well, there's been a few. The amount of times I've hunted them, as well as most people, especially outfitters. I do remember one in particular, and it wasn't to deal with a black bear. It was actually with a barren ground grizzly. I went up to caribou camp, which at that time we flew out of Yellowknife, so it was about a 45-minute flight straight northeast of the city, out into the tundra. My God, is it beautiful up there. Just a side note, the thing that struck me the most up there was how crystal clear the lake was. You look down, you see boulders, and I remember asking the guy, my fellow taxidermist up there, and I says, "So what's that, about 40 feet?" He looks, "That's probably about 100." It was like looking just like this. That's how crystal pristine the water was. Anyway, we got up into part of the tundra, up into the hills. There's no trees up there, of course. And I can remember standing up there. I was on one part of the hill. The client was in the middle, and the other taxidermist was on the other side. And I'm glassing for caribou, and I happened to see this spot running kind of towards me. And I look, and it's a grizzly. First time I've ever seen a grizzly in the wild. So I thought to myself, this is pretty cool, but it's not. So I go running to tell the other taxidermist and client, okay, we have a grizzly. Up there, they're protected. You cannot shoot grizzly unless, of course, they come into your camp and you're threatened. And with that, if that ever happens, you have to report it. Then they come and take the bear. So anyway, we didn't want to shoot the grizzly. So we're watching just to be aware. So we said, okay, well, we're going to go the opposite way. So we started walking down this great big hill, and it's like walking on sponge with rocks all over the place. The other fellow, he looks at me and he says, "What is that?" And we look, and it's a wolverine. Well, I've got a tag. We've all got tags, right? You can hunt wolverine up there. So we're sitting there watching this wolverine, and I drop my pack, and I'm sitting there, and I'm lined up on it. And then Glenn, he goes, "Bear." And we go, "What?" Behind the wolverine, all of a sudden, we can see this grizzly running towards us. Don't know if it was the same one, came way around. Like, this is a kilometer by the time it came around. So we're watching this bear, and he's getting bigger and bigger, and he's actually running towards us. So within about 80 yards, the client was on one side of the rock. I was on the other side of the rock. Both our rifles were trained on him. Glenn, the other guy, was on top of the rock, and he's going like this, waving at this bear to try to get his attention. And this thing would start pounding the ground like this. Just he would stand, and then he would start pounding and huffing. And this is within 80 yards. And all I'm doing is I'm like this, shoot now, like now. It was pretty scary. I would say this was a boar, by the way. I would say that from the ground to the top of his shoulders was getting close to 5 feet. He was a monster. He literally just his whole body just rippled. So eventually he started pounding the ground. He stood up, looked at us, started coming to more, and then started waving our arms and yelling. Then he eventually veered and started running away. So I got a little bit of video of him. When I say video, I was a dot. After, I changed my shorts to grab my video camera, I sat there and started videoing him. Meanwhile, as I'm videoing, the guy says, "Hey, there's the wolverine." So we look, and this wolverine was running towards the bear, trying to keep up with him. So the thing stopped. I dropped my camera, grabbed my gun, leaned up on the rock. The thing stopped about 200 yards at that, and actually pinned him and got a wolverine. The bear's still running. But from what I understand, it's not uncommon for a wolverine to chase after the bear or follow it and actually chase the grizzly off of its kill.
Great story.
Hey,
It was fun.
Blair, I got a question for you. We'll get back to some other stories, but obviously you guys probably do all tree stands at your camp.
Yeah.
I know there's other people that sit on the ground and they'll do bear, they'll hunt bear on the ground, or they'll hunt and stalk or spot and stalk bears. I would think that hunting a bear out of a ground blind would be rather interesting.
Yeah, like we do mostly tree stand, but we also do ground blinds.
Okay.
We have some hunters. We have some physically disabled hunters too, where we've had to use ground blinds in those situations. And yeah, it's very interesting because those bears will come right to the opening in that ground blind.
Yeah.
And they'll get a lot of hunters excited.
Do you guys have, like, would it be a cage or is it actually just a ground blind?
No, just a regular pop-up blind from Cabela's.
Wow, that's crazy.
I like pop-up blind hunting actually better because it conceals movement and scent a lot better than tree stand. But it's just a lot of guys don't want to be on the ground with bears.
No, absolutely.
Do they tear them down at the end of the night when you go home?
Well, yeah, we got to pack them down because we've left some up. And unless you spray them with Raid and stuff, they'll tear them and shred them right up there in the night.
Huh. Interesting.
Well, I got to tell my bear story. I have over the years being a guide, I've run into bears a lot, but this one was like you, Don. Yeah, I've got a lot of good black bear stories, but the one that sticks out for me is back in the early 2000s. When I kind of stepped away from guiding, I did a lot of video recording for guys all over the North America. I went on a desert sheep hunt with a bow and arrow and videoed that. So I got to travel along, and we were in Wyoming, Cody, Wyoming. And I don't know if the name Ron Doobie means anything to any of you guys, but Ron Doobie was the master ceremony of the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, the banquet, the calling contest. He was the MC for years, like 20 years. And he was the guide on this hunt that this guy bought an elk hunt. And I was there to call elk as well as to video it. And like Tammy, you were saying earlier when we were chatting, how when you're on your trip in Africa, you got spent a good part of the day relaxing. Well, that's, I mean, if you know elk, especially mountain hunting, you hunt in the morning and then you go back to camp or whatever. You spend a good part of your day sleeping. So Ron Doobie was one of the only outfitters in Wyoming that bordered the Yellowstone Park, and you actually have to ride through the Yellowstone Park. He's got permits to get to his area, and so he deals with a lot of park elk and a lot of grizzlies because of the Yellowstone Park. So we were elk hunting the very first day. My friend's son got a really nice big 6x6. So the next day we were in camp, and it was a beautiful sunny day. And they had problems with bears that particular year. I think it was 2003. They had a lot of problems with bears coming into camp, and one of their guides actually got attacked. But on our trip, we didn't get attacked, but this grizzly kept coming into camp every day. We saw him every day. And finally, Ron, and this is the funny part of the story, is I didn't know mules have a natural hate for bears and predators, so like wolves and stuff like that. So he uses mules for packing his hunters and his meat and stuff like that. So finally Ron got fed up with this camp bear, and he told one of his guides to turn the mules loose. And I've got it on video, and it was amazing. Soon as they opened the gate to the corral, the mule put their nose to the ground and tore after that grizzly. And it was like within a couple of feet from behind it, chasing it. And they would stop after a little while and come back. The bear would come back. And for a good part of an hour, that two mules chased that grizzly around like it was crazy. I never dreamt in a million years that would happen, but I got on video to prove it. Hey Tammy, what's the hunting in BC like compared to Saskatchewan here? Like you guys can't bait, so what do you primarily? How do you guys hunt?
I just spot and stalk, go out, hope that you're lucky.
So do you basically, if you spot and stalk, is you basically try to take what you get or what you find? Because like here in Saskatchewan, we can look over 10, 15, 20 bear before we harvest one.
Yeah, I think it has. I think it all depends on whether you're a rookie hunter just starting. You're probably gonna the first bear you see, you're probably gonna take it. But areas that we go, I mean, the cut blocks are so massive, and you can sit there and see a bear for quite some time. Like there is time. It's not like it's like you see it and you just quickly kind of make that choice. I mean, it's so there's just so much land. It's not very often that I go hunting and all of a sudden one just pops out. Usually I can see him just digging through deadfall or whatever, just farting around, minding his own business, and I can sit there with my binoculars and check him out and see how close I can get to him. Sometimes, like I was deer hunting last fall, and I spotted a bear 2 kilometers away in a big grassy field by power lines. Power lines just went way up the mountain for miles and miles and miles. And I was able to get close enough where, and I think we talked about this before. I got close enough where I parked my quad and I snuck in. Wind was perfect. Everything was good. I just wanted to see how close I could get. And I had him in my sights and looked at him for a while. And I thought, it's getting a little bit late. Do I really want to be pulling a bear out of here by myself? Probably not. I'll come back another time. But it all depends on the area. Like where I am in BC, like region 2, it's very lush, very green. It's a hard hunt. And I think that's why when I get to harvest something or my kids harvest something, I am ultra excited because it is hard. It is hard, but it's exciting. It's exciting to be out there. But then when we go to Merritt, which is region 3, which is more my hunting area where I've hunted for the last 12 years, I've hunted Merritt. It's a lot different landscape. It's very rocky and you can see a lot more. It's very dry. And I've actually taken quite a few bears up in Merritt. A lot of spring bears up in Merritt, and it's just all log and road stuff, really, up in the FSRs, and you just go, and if you don't get anything, you get firewood.
Well, and I mean, if I could jump in, like where I'm up at in BC up north, we live kind of northeast BC, so we have tons of agriculture, and so where I scout a lot of like creek ravines and stuff like that in the fall where all the crops are. And then what happens from there is I look at where the bears are really late season, and that's typically where they end up denning. And so those are the first spots I hit when the spring comes around, because usually like what I've seen is that they don't go too far, especially start getting into November. They don't go too far from where they're foraging, because in the springtime, they'll usually try to return to those same spots to try to get some, quick snacks or whatever, like, and hit those south-facing slopes in that creek ravine. So yeah, it's definitely hard. Spot and stalk is not, bear baiting. And I've actually taken a black bear in Alberta with a hunter host, which was super fun because I got to hunt over bait. So that was a really neat experience. But it is true, like, you don't get to glass over a lot of bears. So, I've got one in my area I've been after for 3 years, and he keeps eluding me, and I can't pattern him to save my life because all they do is just roam around and you can't isolate an area. But we'll see this year. And I saw him last year in November, so he's still out there. But yeah, it's definitely a different game.
I was in Vanderhoof for a hunt. It was actually an elk hunt, and I ended up taking. I was fortunate enough. I was doing a wild game cooking demonstration at a fair, and there was a bunch of big rodeo was going on, and this lovely lady came up to me and she says, I just love what you do with your kids and getting them out and getting them hunting and fishing, and I would like to welcome you on our 7,500 acre ranch. And you're welcome to come out here. We've got elk, we've got bear, we've got mule deer. And of course, I totally jumped on it. But actually, that was the same year where grizzly, we still had tags for grizzly in BC, and I actually got one, and I had to go up to Hazelton. So it was actually, I went up there, saw one bear, it was total, or one grizzly, it was totally overgrown, like so overgrown. I'm like, why did I put in for this area? I can't even see. Like, it was not the greatest. But coming back, ended up at that ranch in Vanderhoof, and ended up taking a nice 5x6 and a cinnamon bear in an oat field. So yeah, we were like scoping out all the fields, and yeah, they come out, and it's easier out here. We don't really have that. Not
Yeah, if you can find an landowner with an oat field, get to be his best friend, because you'll find elk and moose and bear and everything in there.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm allowed back there though, because the one of the it's like a few families that lived on the property, and the one husband was like, yeah, we've got a couple of bulls out there. He says, but the 6x6 is mine, and kind of laughing. Okay, I know, I'm not going to take your 6x6. And anyway, I ended up taking the 5x6, and I think he didn't think I could do it, so he was ticked that I took this 5x6. Yeah, that was, oh my gosh, that was hard. Using a come along to get the thing in the back of a truck. Holy cow.
Blair, do you have a good story for us, either a personal or a client story?
Yeah, I got one. Well, yeah, I got lots of tracking stories that are like they're bad, but I got one good funny one. Yeah, a father and son and his uncle come bear hunting with us. The one father and his buddy, they tagged out early, so I retrieved those bears and brought them back, and then the son called about the last half hour illegal light. I shot one. So I brought his dad and his uncle in with me on the bike to go recover his son's bear. Well, the son's in a tree stand. He's all excited. He's just shaking. Yeah, that bear, he went off to the left. And I looked off the trail. I could see about 60 yards in the bush. I could just see this arrow and this nocturnal going up and down. This bear's just laying there breathing. He hit it with a paralyzing shot or broke its back or something, but it's going up and down. So I told him, I said, come down. I got in as close as I can in the willows safely. Didn't take my shotgun, but I told him, I said, come over here, and see if you can weave an arrow in here at about 8 yards to give him a finishing shot. Well, his dad and his uncle are right beside me. So when the kid lets the arrow fly, that bear just exploded. We all took off running, and I said, run for the bikes. We all got back to the bikes. It was a finishing shot anyways. Like, it was paralyzed. It just exploded. It just jumped. But we couldn't find the dad for like 10 minutes. Here he'd run into a tree and knocked himself out cold. I was freaking out that he got attacked or eaten. We couldn't find him for 10, 15 minutes until I found, and it had already gotten dark by then, so I had the flashlight. I said, I can't find your dad. I don't know what happened. And finally I found him laying on, he was just waking up beside a tree. He took off running, turned around and knocked himself out cold.
What's that old story? As long as you can run faster than the slowest guy?
Yeah. That's what I said. Every man for yourself. Run for the quads.
Well, like I've said before, I've never taken a bear, but when I first started teaching in Saskatchewan, one of the custodians at my school knew that I hunted, so we'd always talk hunting, and he was into bear hunting. And he stopped one day at the end of the day after I had practice, and he said, "You should come bear hunting with me." I says, "Well, I don't know, like I've never bear hunted before, but." I said, I'll go along with you. I'll just kind of check it out. So he was archery hunting, and so we went to his stand, and he's kind of showing me, what he does and has his stand there, and we were kind of checking things out. Well, the scrapes in those trees, I reached as high as it could reach with my arm. I couldn't reach the top of the scrapes where that bear was working that thing. And he had a big stone. I don't know where there's a big flat stone. I used to drive as a kid, my brothers and I had a 73 Plymouth Fury, and that stone was as big as a freaking hood of that car. And he said that stone, they would just move it back and forth. He put his grease and his bear bait on there, and they would just flip that stone around. So the next time I went out, I made sure I took a tag and my rifle with me, because I couldn't believe the size of that stone. They were just flipping it back and forth. They were just power.
Hey, a couple of things I want to talk about, Dawn. One for you, and then the rest for everybody is, Dawn, how does a guy score a skull? Because I know if people don't say use their hide as a trophy, lots of times they want to do the skull. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. Actually, I'm just going to give you a quick look up here. There's one of a skull finished. I think you guys can see it okay.
Yep.
Yep.
And of course, a bear head. So anyway, the skull, and I know Blair can actually talk about this good too, because he's an actual official measurer. Basically, for just a rough score, what you want to do is, you have the skull here. So what you want to do is you don't usually use the bottom. You don't use the bottom jaw part. It involves two measurements. It involves a measurement of the length from here to the tip of the skull, and it involves the width, which is on the two bones here. Oops, sorry. I'm getting all tangled up here. Sorry about that. Which it involves the two measurements here. So what I do, or if you want to just rough without an official score, if you have a set of calipers, much like these, where you can actually adjust for, what you do is you make your adjustments with the calipers, tighten them up where the actual measurement is supposed to be. Tighten it up, then you lay this down with a measuring tape in between the 2 points. Measure that as well as the width. Now remember, this is just a rough guess, so it gives you quite an idea. So this bear skull here is literally just under 19 inches, which is a pretty big bear. You know, record book I believe is 21 to get into Boone and Crockett.
So 20 awards, 21-inch all time.
All time, that's right, yeah. So, and Blair could actually expand upon the official way to measure a bear skull if you would like to.
Yeah, like you're right. If you have a calipers like that, you can do the length and width quite easily with a carpenter square. But even if you don't have those tools, you can use books or any kind of a straight edge or a square and just butt it up as long as you're at a 90-degree angle to get your widths and your lengths. But you got to make sure that that skull is perfectly level from where you measure to the furthest part of the front of the teeth and to the back. You got to make sure you're completely level when you're doing that measurement. But yeah, it's pretty simple.
You can't do it with the hide on, is that correct?
No. And you can't do it with the lower jaw attached. You got to have the lower jaw off as well. And if you're going to boil and bleach or use any kind of solution for Boone and Crockett and Pope and Young, you got to wait 60 days after you've brought it out of that solution and let it dry before you can officially measure it. Henry Kelsey in Saskatchewan, there's no drying period. So if you can get all the meat off it and boil it or clean it up really, really good, you can measure it right away.
So to guesstimate on a live bear, it's basically a crapshoot then, or is that what you're saying? Like if you were looking at a bear?
Because bears are like humans, you know what I mean? Like we have 3 different kinds of human body parts, whatever. Bears, you'll have bone bears and you'll have meathead bears, you know what I mean? A lot of times the bears that have real fat cheeks, like their skulls, you'd think they'd go 22, like over 20 some inches, and they don't. You know what I mean? You have bears that have more bone than meat, and others will have more meat than bone. It's very hard to judge like that. I've seen a lot of 500-600 pound bears that barely break 20 inches and a 400 pounder that'll break 21. It's just a different style. They're like humans.
Oh, I think with that being said, obviously, if you see a big bear as defined by most people would define a big bear, chances are good, you know, you're looking at 19 or better.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I'm talking about, 7-foot bear, 6.5, basically from nose to tail. So you can pretty much tell that it's going to be a good skull. However, like Blair had mentioned, is it going to be in the record books or not? That's touch and go.
So the other thing I want to touch on is that's really important and that's brought up a lot. And I actually did a little video on it just the other day is shot placement. What I tell people when it comes to shot placement and to not get it convoluted is to keep it really simple. Like I don't believe somebody said a long time ago, you just aim for the middle of middle or whatever they call that. I don't really believe in that. The way I do it for a bear is it's easy to pick the middle of the bear. But then if I just go roughly 4 inches towards the shoulder, I find you'll always be in the vitals. What's your guys' opinion on that? And what do you use for shot placement?
Yeah,
I
like,
mean, I think. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, like honestly, I've probably tracked and recovered over 1,000 bears in 25 years, and I've tracked lots of wounded bears. But predominantly, you don't want to shoot them. Like it's instinctive as a hunter when we're hunting archery for elk and deer and whatever. It's tight behind the shoulder, and I don't recommend that for bears. I've never recovered a bear shot close to the front shoulder or any further ahead. It is good to stay further back on the bear. Like off the ground, middle to middle, and like you said, 2 to 4 inches ahead is perfect. And you got to remember when you're in a tree stand with that elevation, you want to be above middle to middle by 3-4 inches because you're coming down at an angle. But it don't hurt to shoot a bear further back. I've recovered way more bears shot further back than further forward. Honestly, middle to middle and just a little bit ahead when you're on the ground. But when you get into that tree stand, you got to remember to be up a little bit too from the center of the bear, because on bears, you've got a lot of hair in their belly, and they'll have a lot of fluff hair on the top of their back too. So that's why you got to stay in the middle, because you try and do that heart shot. I've seen a lot of guys miss or wound bears because they shoot them too low because they don't realize there's 3 to 4 inches of hair hanging off the bottom of a bear. It's not like a deer and elk where that hair is tight to their skin.
Oh, and speaking from a taxidermy point of view, don't shoot it in the face.
I've seen hunters shoot him in the face with a rifle. Yeah, you're right.
Yep.
Oh.
Just saying.
Mike, you're going to say something about that?
Well, I was just to go off Blair's point there. Like, I'm kind of pushing over to more bow hunting style. A buddy of mine, I was with him, and we were on a steep ridge, and I told him, I said, just aim under the spine, don't aim for the middle. And he shot too low, and it bottom of the chest cavity completely missed middles, and the bear ended up getting away from us. And later in that season, we actually had a neighbor of ours take that same bear. He's like, yeah, he's got a hole in the bottom of his chest, and the broad completely missed all the vitals and stuff because he forgot about the angle of the arrow. Right? Like if you hit him top third, it's going to go through the bottom third. And, that's just a piece of advice that, I learned too, is like, you have to pay attention to the angle of shot, because you have to remember that it's not like a foam 3D target where you're trying to hit the ring, right? Like you're actually trying to get it to pass through the body. So just as a bow hunter's perspective, going off of what Blair said too, a little further back and watch your angle. But unfortunately, I have to hop off. I have another call to get onto, but I really appreciate you guys having me on, and have a great weekend.
Thanks for joining
rest
us.
of your week.
Yeah.
Okay. See you guys.
See ya.
Tammy, what do you do for shot placement?
I'm the same as you. I look at the center of the bear, and I just move forward, just about 4 inches. It's usually. It's funny though. Talking about shot placement, the first bear that my daughter ever got, she was 14, and took her out on her first hunt, and we ended up seeing this bear on another ridge within about 20 minutes of our hunt, and very excited. He's just kind of working his way up, and there was a bunch of bramble and stuff down below, So I kind of thought that there was a little creek bed in there, and I kind of think that's where his house was. That was his home, and we found out later that it was. Anyways, she, got down and because I had a bipod on the front of her rifle, and she took a shot and she hit it, and it came down, and we kind of knew that he was injured because he ran back down into that same bramble area. But she would have hit that bear perfectly had I talked to her about trajectory, but I never thought in a million years that she was going to take a 320-yard shot on a bear. Being her first time out, I thought, holy smokes. I didn't realize I didn't have my rangefinder with me, and I went back the next day and rangefinded, and I was like, man, Georgia, that's 320 yards. That's a long shot, But yeah, she was perfect shot placement. I told her center, move forward a little bit, and she was just low, unfortunately, but still a dead bear. But yeah.
Darren, what do you got?
I'm just curious, Don, this might be a question for you with taxidermy. A lot of people do European mounts with a large range of animals. You hear different stories from guys putting stuff in anthills and boiling it on their wives' stove, not home. What's some tips for people that want to do a European mount? Obviously, someone like myself, I'd take it to a professional like you, but some backwoods guys, like what would you suggest? Does the anthill thing work, or what's out there?
Well, there's many different processes. And it was actually just not too long ago, I noticed on the Facebook pages that some people were complaining about using those beetles, and when they thought they were done, there was a smell to them. So you have to remember that's I guess a biological way of doing things, and there's going to be a smell if you don't disinfect it. So I would recommend the usual boiling. In a nutshell, you clean it, you boil it, you degrease it, then you whiten it. In the degreasing comes in the boiling and degreasing process comes your disinfecting. So the biggest thing, and a lot of people don't like dealing with it, you have to scramble the brains and get them out, and you have to get as much meat as you possibly can out first before you do the boiling. It just makes it so much easier. And I like to use a pressure washer to clean all that off, including the inside of the brain cavity. But you must beware when you're using that. Beware of the teeth, because they will loosen up and they will fall off.
Hey, Tammy, I got two things for you. One is, and I think we talked a little bit about it at the beginning of the program, but why is there a stigma to eating bear? And lots of people will refuse to eat it when it's such a great meat to eat. And what is your favorite dish to make with bear?
Wow. I think the stigma with bear is that, they're carrion eaters. So I think a lot of people get turned off by that. And I think what I have found, whether it's bear, whether it's any other type of a wild game meat, usually that first chance they get to try it and it's crap, they usually will never try it again. So my whole, life, the past, 7-8 years of cooking predominantly wild game meat is trying to change people's minds. I'm like, just try it. Just give it a try. And I have converted so many people. I can't even tell you. A lot of times when people come over to my house, they're like, what is this? Because they can't tell what it is. I'm like, well, actually, and I mean, my freezer is ridiculous of different types of animals that I have in here to cook with. But yeah, I think it's that. I think it's just the issues with trigonosis and pretty much when it comes to our like domestic animals, you don't hear of too many trigonosis cases anymore. But I know that there was an influx of them in the U.S. between hunters eating undercooked cougar and bear. So it does still happen. You just have to make sure that you cook it properly. Other than that, I mean, I haven't really, as far as bear meat, I think a lot of people think that it's, it kind of tastes like pork or, because I think, there's a bit of a relation there, or it's just too greasy or it stinks. The Vancouver Island bear that you would like to go for a hunt with, a lot of people say that they taste fishy, that it has a fishy odor to it because they're down on the water and they're eating all the salmon and things like that, that they have a different type of smell. I can tell you from experience, I have had bears up in Region 3 and Region 2 and Region 5. I've had bears on the island, and I do not see a difference at all. I don't see a difference in the meat. But I suggest that if they want to try bear for the first time, just try different types of marinating. Marinating does wonders, And if you want to do something like a deep fried bear bite of some kind, I love deep frying with cornstarch. So if you're ever going to do any type of a batter on meat, or do like deep fry the bear, and if you're going to do like a sweet and sour sauce on it or something like that, the best marinade that I use is usually, if I'm just going to have it like just plain, I'll do some type of a garlic salt. I don't use that. I don't use fresh garlic when I do deep frying. Otherwise, you got bits and pieces of black garlic floating around in your oil, so you don't want to use that. So just garlic powder and cornstarch and wine and a little bit of kosher salt, and you're going to make a slurry over top of that bear meat or any type of meat that you're using. But yeah, you kind of create this slurry, let it marinate for 30 minutes or so, take them out, put them inside your deep fryer, and it creates the most amazing crunchy coating on the outside of that meat. You can't peel it off. It's like literally stuck to the meat. And I tell you, every time I can't tell you because I can't say anything yet, but yeah, I'm going to be on TV next year. and I used this slurry. It's actually my mom's recipe. And yeah, everybody went crazy over it. And try it, even with wings. You got to try it. You'll never go back to batter in a bag once you try it.
Blair, just this year, the province of Saskatchewan has come up with a 2 bear tag limit this year. Something that some hunting advocates have been after for a number of years. The bear population is fairly healthy. Just kind of interested in what your perspective is on a 2 bear tag system this year and what that looks like for bear populations.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, the ministry was getting a lot of complaints. I know the past few years with bears in the farmland, and they didn't have enough culvert traps out to keep up with it. And I don't know if crop insurance guys were handling it that much either, but yeah, they've come out with the 2 bear tags now in the farmland regions of Saskatchewan, which is good because, like I said, they are a healthy population. They're not giving us the 2 licenses in the forest though, or for the outfitters. It's just for the farmland. But yeah, no, I think it'll be a lot more opportunities for people in the field for sure. And then necessarily they don't have to shoot both in the spring. They could shoot one in the spring, one in the fall too. Go for a spring bear and a fall bear, which is, like I said, it increases opportunity. And in Saskatchewan, that's a good thing to get more youth out and stuff, to have 2 licenses like that when we have a good, healthy population. So I'm all for that.
Cool.
Back in the late 70s and on, you used to be able to take 2 bears for quite a while until they had stopped it.
Well, guys,
Sorry,
sorry.
go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish up.
Oh no, I was just saying it was awesome to be able to take, like you had said, one in the fall, one in the spring. You go hunting in the spring. I love spring bear hunting because it breaks up the monotony till the fall. Mm-hmm. And if you do happen to get a good bear or whatever in the spring, you still got your tag for the fall. Every time you're hunting elk, you have a tag in your pocket in case.
Well, where I got my baits is farmland, forest fringe with farmland adjacent to it, and they have a real problem with the bears. Matter of fact, the farmers they say they're 10 times worse than the like the big animals like the elk and stuff. He says mm-hmm. One bear will just destroy a canola field, and so they're really they'd really like to see this come in. And I know I said that if I don't get a spring bear, I would love to go and try to spot and stalk a fall bear in the oat fields and stuff like that. So I actually look forward to it.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I'm going to put you on the spot here right now. If other than your weapon, so your bow or your rifle, if you had one thing to put in to make sure you had in your pack for bear hunting, what would it be? Tammy, I'll start with you.
Other than my gun,
Other than your gun or your bow.
have to have 100%. Have to have my rangefinder. Have to have it.
Blair?
My Havalon knife.
Oh yeah, love Havalon.
Darren?
Probably my dad's hunting knife. Carry that
Donnie?
with me.
Well, it's a toss-up. I would probably have a hunting knife with me, or I would have a bag full of food, because in that way, if I do see one, I drop it and back away slowly.
Well, a knife for me is a no-brainer, but believe it or not, in Saskatchewan, and they drive me nuts, I have to have a thermocell.
Oh yeah.
Whenever I'm bear hunt, if I don't have a thermocell, I on it, even if I have a mesh on, I can't stand the mosquitoes. They drive me batty. So a thermocell is a must for me.
Yeah. When you you're making that comment about bears destroying a canola field, want to enlighten you guys a little bit. I was out looking at a crop, looking at a fence line, the fence this year for a customer, and he had bought this property and it had already been rented out before he bought it, so they had put a canola crop in. And he had permission, so we were just driving along the edge, showing me where the fence line was going to go so I can put it in. And there's these huge patches of crop that were gone, and there looked like a hailstorm was just hitting these little pockets. And I looked at the farmer and I was like, what, like elk in here or what? The beavers were eating the canola and just destroying patches of it.
The beavers.
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 Couldn't believe it. He said he came up on them one day when they were feeding, and they had trails through the canola. They had gone from one slough to the other, and they're in there eating the canola, and it honestly looked like gophers had attacked it and just leveled it, and it was the beavers eating the canola field.
Oh,
Well, guys, we're gonna
I didn't
wrap
know
it
they
up
would
here.
eat canola.
We're gonna wrap it up here soon. I see we got a few people that dropped off, but we still have some people here. I'm going to go along and I'm going to go and ask if they have any questions of you guys, the pros. And then after that, I think we're going to call her a day. So I'm going to start with my list here. I'm going to start with Bobby. I'm going to unmute you, Bobby. If you got a question for these guys or a quick story, feel free. So Bobby, you're unmuted there. Go ahead.
Okay. For Tammy, actually, what would it entail to have somebody from Saskatchewan come out your way and go on a bear hunt?
Well, you have to go through an outfitter.
Okay.
So you can get a hold of the BC Guide Outfitters Association, and they can give you a list of all the outfitters in our area.
Okay.
And but there is one outfitter that I would suggest, and he's awesome. His name is Mike Hockridge, and he's up in Quesnel. Mike Hockridge actually has a show on the History Channel. It's about breaking wild horses.
Oh.
And,
Okay.
yeah, he's a super great guy. He's called Big Country Outfitters, and it's all horseback out in the middle of nowhere. But he's brought in people into some pretty nice size bears up there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Hey, Tammy, I believe BC, do they have not a Class C guide where, like, say, for example, you have a brother in Saskatchewan, you as a resident, isn't it a Class C every 2 years? Where
Sorry, go ahead.
I think I remember something when I used to guide there that was the case. I don't know if it is anymore, because I do know some guys go to Saskatchewan or from Saskatchewan go to the Vancouver bear hunting. So that I don't know if you know anything about that, but I think it's called a Class C license or something. Resident.
Not off the top of my head. Do I know about it? I just, believe me, like when I have friends, have come overseas or from different provinces, I know that I have to have an outfitting license in order to be able to take them out. So I've been harassed big time to get my license so I can do that. So I have to. It's got to happen here pretty soon. I have to get it done because there's lots of people I'd love to take out. That's what, remember we were talking about that today. That's the exciting part.
It is.
Watching somebody else succeed. I love it.
Thanks, Bobby. All right. Let's see here. Brock, are you there? Do you got anything for these guys? I don't think Brock's there. Natasha, I think you're let's see if I can find you to unmute you here. Natasha, you might have to unmute yourself there. I can't find you in my list. If you got a question for these guys, I actually know Natasha.
There she goes.
I bought beavers off her last year for bait.
Yeah, my question's for Tammy. I mean, being a trapper as well as a hunter, and taking kids out, do you go out with your husband or you do it by yourself with your kids? What is your take on that? I mean, for me, I go out with my husband and we take our kids out, but sometimes it doesn't work that way for, my husband to be able to go out with us. So, we're kind of looking at other options for a mom to take her kids out.
I have been I've been hunting with my kids for 12 years. My daughter's 23 years old now, and she's actually was my hunting partner forever. And her and I would go out together. And if it wasn't her, then I would take out, usually it would be my daughter and myself go out for a hunt together, and then I would bring one of the younger ones along and get them into grouse hunting and stuff like that. I do a lot of solo hunts, and I do a lot of hunts with my kids. And, but back then, when I'm bringing a few kids, it's a lot of truck hunting. It's just driving into an area and going together. You always have to be careful about the safety aspect of it. But yeah, no, I totally encourage it. Yeah, I encourage it.
I get it. Like, I have 5 that, like, 4 of our kids hunt now. So, I mean, now we have a baby. So everything's like a learning curve for us, right? So
there's a lot of times that I would go out to, 3:00 in the morning. I'd leave the house and the kids would know that I'd be gone. I'd be home by dinner. I'd have everything all ready to go for them. Sometimes you can take them, sometimes you can't. A lot of times when I go out by myself and I come home, the kids come running out. Did you get anything? Or if I have this sounds funny, but in my house, I have a massive willow tree in my front yard, huge willow tree, and that's my hanging tree. And it's right in my front yard. So if I come in and I start backing my truck up to that tree, the kids just come running out. And I've got 6 kids, by the way.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Natasha. Hey, Brock, I see you're there now. Do you got anything for these guys?
Blair, are you guys gonna hopefully maybe run fall hunts for bears this year if these guys get things turned around?
Yeah, more than likely we're going to run fall bear hunters like we always do, and there's talk that they might open the season up for August 1st just to have a longer season that way if we lose all of May and June yet. But I still have a little bit of hope for June, not so much for May anymore, but I guess we'll see. It's kind of a tough decision to make right now. So, yeah, I'm hoping we get to.
What are your thoughts on the second bear license?
In the farmland, I think it's good. I mean, it's an option. You don't necessarily have to take 2 bears in the spring. You can take one in the spring, take one in the fall. And I think the farmland population is high enough that it can take a 2-bear season. I think it's a good thing. It's more opportunity. Anytime you can have more people in the field like that, especially youth, for bear, and that's probably the best hunt you can do to take any kind of kids on is a bear hunt. So I think it's great to have that opportunity.
Yeah, no, totally agree.
All right, buddy. Thanks, Brock. Let's see here. Kathy, are you there? Kathy, you got a question for these guys?
Hello?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, this is Ted anyway. Kathy's using her phone, but and I got a son in Alberta. I got a son that's in Alberta. He's going out for his first bear hunt this spring, and I'm because I know he's going where he's going hunting that there are grizzly area. Is there any kind of precautions to be watching over in that kind of a situation?
I think the question is who's the question for? Just anybody in general?
Yeah, just anybody in general. I don't need to direct it to exactly.
Well, Tammy, you're probably the closest to
It's
the
just-
grizzly
Yeah,
population.
to be totally honest, he was cutting out so bad I couldn't hear.
I think the question was,
Grizzlies,
he's-
but somebody
he's
had
got
to
it.
bear hunt.
I think he said has a son or something going hunting and into grizzly country.
Yeah.
What's to watch out for?
Oh, you know what? Because we can't take any of them, for me it's a fearful situation for me. Just because I would try to think to myself, what would I do if I was in a position where all of a sudden there was a grizzly bear there that was putting my life at risk? How would I deal with the situation? Honestly, I have to be honest, like since the tags are not available anymore, I've been avoiding areas. Seriously. Especially as a solo hunter, I've been doing that. Or if I go into grizzly areas, I will try to be in a vehicle. I actually have bear spray. Not that that's going to help, but I do have that. I did have a friend of mine too that has a bear banger, just in case. But honestly, I just try to keep my distance and try to be in an area where I can see all angles. And being a spot and stalk hunter, you always it's dangerous, really it is. And yeah, for me, I mean, if I was going to go right thick into a grizzly area, I'd be on a machine. Just in case.
I'll expand a little bit on that because I guided for a long time in grizzly country, and I haven't been up there since they stopped the grizzly bear hunting. I will say the problem basically arises when you have an animal on the ground.
There's a lot more grizzlies now. Last season, holy cow, we had a lot of encounters. Lots of encounters. It's funny how closing it down for just a couple seasons, what difference it makes to the population.
So when you're in grizzly country and you have an animal on the ground, that's when you have to be on your toes because they can ambush you. Even if you think you have your gun or whatever leaning on a tree, that's when they're going to take advantage of you. And I'd say most of the bear attacks on hunters have been when they're trying to process their animals. So just be hyper vigilant and be ready. I know when I guided in grizzly country, I made the hunter basically stand guard because I didn't want to get ambushed.
Yeah, we took a mule deer up in grizzly country up in Goldbridge, BC. I had a goat tag out there last year, and when I was getting this mule deer ready, the other hunter was on alert the whole time, right beside me, because they were everywhere out there. It was nerve-wracking.
Okay, so
I would even argue that they're attracted to the shot.
Yes, exactly. That was a thing. Boom, dinner bell.
Dinner bell.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree. So Brooke, a good buddy of mine is here. Brooke, do you got anything for these guys?
Nope, nothing tonight, guys.
Thanks for joining us. Okay, Sarah, you're last one on my list, I believe.
Let's see. No, nothing to ask tonight.
Sarah. Okay, thank you. Well, guys, I think we should wrap it up. We've been going a long time. I know we could probably talk all night, especially having this many people specialized in their areas. Darren, do you have anything?
I would just like to thank everybody for coming on tonight. Carving time out of your schedule to sit down and talk with fellow hunters, and we really appreciate you doing that. Again, thanks for Muck for setting it up. Muck is trying to twist my arm to go bear hunting this year, so we're working on it. I'm trying to get some beavers down on the ground for him, so we could do that. But everybody who is going out into the backcountry this year, stay safe and through this pandemic. It's a good place to go self-isolate. So everybody, thanks for joining us tonight. We really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, before we go, Tammy, I got one last question for you.
Okay.
How the heck did you get the nickname Sossy? Because it just that I don't know, Sossy, is it has to do with your cooking, or is it like a nickname, or what?
Yeah, actually, my late husband Gary used to call me Sossy, and he used to spell it Sossy because I'm this fiery little Fireball.
Okay.
And, yeah, no, it was my nickname for 18 years. I was never called Tammy, ever. Never. And so I thought I'd pay homage to him and call my show Sossy Outdoors because that's my name.
Awesome. Well, Tammy, good luck with your show. I know that we're trying to get together on a duck hunt maybe this fall.
Yes, let's just, I hope.
Let's hope that's gonna. I'm working on that. Blair, good luck to you guys. You know, it's unfortunate what's happening. Yeah, it's that damn virus, and I wish you guys well, and I wish you get back to business. What you brought up earlier about the bears, just more bears being in the woods now because nobody's hunting them is a big concern. Actually, I never looked at it that way. So thanks for coming on, Donnie.
Yep.
As always, you're the man when it comes to taxidermy for me. Your knowledge is second to none, and Don and I do a lot of bird hunting together, and I tend to shoot his birds for him, and that's what he tells everybody, that he has to shoot mine. So I had to get that in there.
One quick thing here, Tammy.
Yes.
I have a recipe that actually was originated for bear meat, a glaze, like a barbecue sauce, and it's so simple, and I've used it for 40 years now. You can use it on everything, and I got it out of a cookbook. I can't even remember the name of it. It's equal parts, so 3 tablespoons, 3 tablespoons, 3 tablespoons, however you want. Soy sauce, packed brown sugar, and margarine.
Oh, really?
Put it in a saucepan, get it boiling, get it, a little bit saucy. And put that on the barbecue, and it was originally for bear loins.
Really? That's awesome.
So try that. I've tweaked it a bit and used butter instead of margarine. However, you have to be very careful because it goes like syrup, and then if it's not warm, it won't spread.
Yeah.
Right. So, but margarine, soy sauce, and brown sugar, packed brown sugar.
I'm gonna try that.
I had that on salmon. I had that on salmon up in Alaska one time.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, they had this huge barbecue, open pit barbecue with all these pieces of salmon, and we were actually goldsmithing up there, gold panning on our honeymoon, and it came on this barbecue as part of our deal. And they had that thing, and they're glazing all these pieces of salmon, and that's what they're using. Super simple, and it was awesome.
Oh, it's delicious. And I just keep putting it on. Just keep putting it on as it's searing, right? Oh, it's delicious. That might be one to try for bear meat because that's what it was originally for.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for joining us. I know people are gonna get a lot of information out of this program, and I want everybody to stay healthy. I want everybody to get back to what we consider normal, and good luck in the coming months and the fall. And yeah, thanks for just joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having
Nice
me.
meeting. Nice meeting all of you. And thanks again, Muck, for inviting me.
Yeah, and thanks for everybody that's joining as far as watching it. And this Cabela's gift card, we're gonna once I post this video and people view it, or share it. If you joined and if you shared, I'll draw some names, and the gift cards will come right directly from Cabela's corporate to you. So thanks everybody for joining and viewing. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon.
Awesome.
Okay, take care.
Take care, guys.
Yeah, guys.